So we have a very lengthy article, but I will be trying to simplify it according to the need of the examination here for your prelims and GS1 and GS2 when it comes to the denotified tribes. Now, denotified tribes earlier were infamously known as criminal tribes. They were actually known as born criminals. They were actually known as addicted to committed crimes. Also, they were infamously associated with potential criminals. But what the British administration back in the colonial times tried to actually control were three kinds of population. The denotified tribes, which were generally the tribes which were involved in various criminal activities according to the British, but they were actually fighting against the British resistance. Also, there were various semi-nomadic and nomadic tribes. So these were the sections of the population which were given this kind of names. And even a Colonial Criminal Tribes Act was enacted in 1971 to restrict their movement, to arrest them, to detain them, right? But when we talk about the real nature of these individuals, they were actually normal people. They were nomadic tribes. You know, nomadic tribes, they go from one forest to another, one grassland to another. They are, for example, communities such as the Banjaras, the Gaddi, the Gujar communities, right? A lot of them are still resident in various parts of the states. So this is where we have to understand that these are actually people who were resident in those regions for thousands of years. But if you can understand, in 1911 census, the British kind of legalized this kind of institutions too, right? For example, their last count was given in 1931 census. After that, we did not get any proper count of how many denotified tribes or the various tribal sections that we were talking about were present. After independence, definitely the government of India straight away cancelled this act. The government of India renamed it as Habitual Offenders Act. So generally, these were the various communities who belong to the SC, ST or even the OBC lists. So there are various state governments which came up with some amounts of reservation or some protection for these communities. But mostly when we talk about the denotified tribes, as of now we do not have any national level notification for them to be classified as backward class or OBCs or STs or SCs, right? So they are right now only known as denotified tribes because they are right now denotified from the earlier Criminal Tribes Act, right? Now, what is happening as of now, the government of India over a period of time since independence have had taken so many measures for mainly the SC and the ST communities and also the OBC communities. But if the state governments do not notify them as these communities, the government cannot do anything or say various measures cannot be taken for them. And it is also the failure of the government. For example, there is a scheme known as Scheme for Economic Empowerment of DNTs, specially dedicated for the denotified tribes. So it is having a total corpus of around 200 crore implemented to be around by 2025-26, mainly looking at education, health, various job opportunities and also giving them pakka houses under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. But this scheme has not been utilized properly, and there are so many people from the denotified sections of the population who also tell that a certificate about their status is not even given by the state government, right? Also, the backwardness, for example, in one state is much more bad when it compares to other states. For example, say at a national level, the DNTs are not at all equal. In some states, they have some OBC status. In some other states, they do not have any status at all. So they are facing a generational poverty level. Also, the historical narrative against their tribes, that they were criminals, they were this, they were that, they are still being labeled right now, right? They are still being cancelled right now by the people. And that is where these issues are actually plaguing them for a long period of time. And that is why they are coming up with so many demands. Firstly, they demand a constitutional status for their backwardness. That is, they should be classified based on constitutional provisions. Also, they demand that the upcoming census should be having a column known as DNTs. That since 1931, there has been no census for them, right? And that is why we should be trying to understand how many people are there in this community. But the government is telling that, okay, we can include the census one, but we cannot make a constitutional body for you. We will be having a welfare board under the Ministry of Social Justice, but not a constitutional body. Now, despite their demands and also the government response, we now have to look at some of the various commissions which are set up to look into their matters. Firstly, the Iyengar Committee, right? For example, it was actually the very first committee to look into the conditions of the DNTs. Second, in 2008, we had the Renke Commission. It is actually officially first national commission which recommended measures, but these recommended measures were not taken up. Also, we had the Idate Committee of 2017. The Idate Committee actually notified or identified around 1,200 communities which were in various leads in the various state governments, right? And it found that 268 communities were not classified at all. They were not classified as either of these communities at all. And the socio-economic levels this community found out in this particular DNTs were very, very low. That is why they needed the government of India to help them out. Next, the Niti Aayog, along with the Anthropologic Survey of India, they also found out that there were around 268 DNTs in the country, but the recommendations and the report of the same are still in cold storage. That means action is not being taken to actually help these communities getting classified. Because here mainly what the issue is happening is the conflict between center and state. The center is telling that it is the state government responsibility to notify them as SC, ST or OBCs, and the state government is telling that, okay, the funds and the various other incentives and also the overall broad dimension and the definition of DNTs is not yet clear. And that is why we need to conduct the census right now. Firstly, we need to understand officially how many sections of DNTs are not yet classified, what is their total strength, and that is when we can have proper figures to take steps for them. Now we will be moving on to the next one.